So the designers that are with me here tonight, I have Steph Larson to my right, who's our productions designer. Oh, and of course the playwright. Lenore, Doxsee, lighting designer, Lien, set designer. I don't. Chris isn't here, is he? Did he have to go? He might have had to.
He's here.
He's somewhere. Chris Giarmo, who's our sound designer and choreographer, is floating around somewhere and might join us later. He's the guy with the yellow hat. The other guy with the yellow hat. Is there another guy with the yellow hat? Oh, Caleb. Anyhow. So Raphael was kind enough to actually allow us to begin with a question for you. Chris Giarmo. Hi, Chris. Raphael was kind enough to allow us to start with a question for you because I think I find in these particular types of conversations actually that the most valuable information. This is, by the way, our first preview, so we're sort of like, and you are really our first. Like we had an invited dress today, but that was like friends and students, and it was maybe there was probably I'd say 20 people total. But you're our first sort of public audience, so. As you can imagine, there's some information to be gleaned from you all. But the question that we wanted to sort of open up to you all, actually, is what questions do you have?
Was there a finished script going into the production, or was the...
Why do you ask that question?
I'm just curious if the devising of the piece was in the piece itself, because it was like, it was a process of these performers coming together. Was that part of the creation of the script?
I guess sort of yes and yes. I think the script is finished, sort of. We're like finished but open to an intense amount of collaboration. So a lot of the scenes that were sort of in the more theatrical lighting were scenes that at their root started from the actors and were shaped by Eric and directed a lot by Eric. But I think that a lot of the play was created collaboratively, but the text for the most part was already there.
And this is actually the second production of this script. The world premiere happened in Chicago at Victory Gardens last spring, and Jackie and I were part of that, but really everyone else was a completely new component. I think one of the great gifts of this opportunity was to be able to sit down with new designers and a new cast and see what happens when there's sort of radically different voices and ideas in the room. But it's true, like Jackie's play is a kind of, you should all buy a copy of the play. You like that, Raphael?
Excellent.
You should all buy a copy of the play. Only because, you'll find that it's actually quite remarkable. The characters, as they are described in the play, are actually actor 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And their second names are black woman, white man, black man, another white man, another black man, and Sarah, which I've yet to understand fully. But but the script, when you look at the script, the characters are archetypes. They're sort of, I would say that when you read it, they come off as kind of archetypes. And so the gift of Jackie's play is that sort of in the room, the script is so minimal in its way that there's really a density of choices that must be made by everyone working on it in order for it to make the journey that it needs to make. So and then I would say in our process there's a lot of the presentation scenes that you saw shaped immensely by everyone here around me, but most of those presentation scenes actually the heart of them started with devised work amongst the company within the room. So and then those are kind of taken from there.
Thank you.
If you want to talk about that or no? More questions? Oh, did I see another hand?
I loved it. First of all, I thought it was just spellbinding, brilliant, unlike anything I've seen, and the design was exquisite. And I really noticed the design. Actually, I'm happy the designers were here. I had a question about the ending. As I'm sure you.
What's your question?
I felt uncomfortable. what was behind the choice to not have a curtain call? I can't think of any play I've ever been to that didn't have a curtain call. Yeah, it was a really interesting choice. Was it your intention for us to feel like, oh, uncomfortable, like, is this the end, should we clap?
Yeah, thanks, Brandon, by the way.
In the active.
No, I mean, like, actually, the funny thing is, I mean, how do you want to talk about it? Do you want to start? It's not answered yet. It's not finalized. The question of whether or not, say, like, I will describe this as, I will say that there was a choice surrounding the choice for you all to arrive into an empty space and to set your seats out in the space.
Yeah, that was great.
Right, that's a kind of initial invitation to the audience as they enter the space, to provide you a choice, right? And not just the choice of like where to sit in a house, in a formed house, but actually to allow you to the extent as it is, form the house for us. But I think the question that we've been really fascinated by, and we've had long conversations about this as we've been going sort of like, what is the ending of the play? I think Chris made a really amazing observation the other day about the sort of when you're tracking this play, one of the things that's really great about Jackie's language is that in the process scenes especially, the way that she crafts dialogue, it has a kind of ring of realness, right? There's a lot of interruptions, there's a lot of incomplete thoughts, there's a lot of like things that actually don't quite make sense because people sometimes speak before they think. And there's all of these things that live in the text. And so what Chris's observation was that in the description of the last scene of the play, and the last scene of the play really, I think, begins, well, there's this thing called processation that Jackie has in the play, but the last scene really begins with that last sort of improvisation, that the scene in the rehearsal room that turns into an improvisation, right? And that at one point that improvisation begins to take on a life of its own. And in the life that it takes, we're not sure, Jackie's intention is that we're not sure where we are in that moment. Are we in the rehearsal room? But maybe there's actually theater going on. I don't know if you felt it or not, but all the stage lights kind of flooded the house at one point, in particular towards the moment of lynching in the play. And so you're not sure where you are. And then what happens at the end of the play as those lights go away and you're left back in the rehearsal room, and you have these actors that are sort of responding to what's just transpired. The big thing is that moment when, I don't know if you all saw it, this is a moment that's been changing a lot. It's when Philip, who's our actor 4, just as he's about to exit, turns back, and he sees the audience for the first time. And that, what Chris's observation was, in a way, sort of like we were sort of seeking or chasing a kind of realness, that like acknowledging all the artificiality of the fact that it's a theater, that it's a play, that these are lines that are being spoken, and that in this moment, whatever it was that sort of like gave us a boundary between the actions of these actors and us sort of is removed. And so that realness was interesting to me because I'm actually getting to the answer. No, I know, sorry. I'm very sorry. No, because I'm trying to understand it a little bit. Like, I think the question of the end of the play is simply, like we could end the play there, but I think there's actually a second ending in a way. And it's this moment of, it happened tonight in an interesting way, I think. And it's been different a little bit every time, but like, what is our response when we're left alone in this room? Like when we are part of like it's easy to end the play where the play sort of naturally seems to want to end, and then we're no longer part of this room. But if the last moment is about making us part of this room, and then his exiting and leaving us in this room to be part of the room before the play has ended, what is that moment for all of us? And for some people, it's laughter. For other people, it's discomfort. For some people, it's confusion. And so the real question for us is actually what to do once we get past that point. Like, we did intend to leave the audience in the space for a period of time. How did it feel?
It was great.
Yeah.
Like excruciatingly great.
Yeah.
Waiting for someone, because we all knew what needed to happen, but it was like, who's going to go first? It was this like mob mentality. It was great.
I have a question for Mimi to start with. We joke at work that it costs an awful lot of money to make Soho Rep look like a terrible rehearsal room. And I'm wondering, where did this idea of this naturalistic staging come from, and how did you research sort of everything that's around us?
Well, it kind of started with this room. I mean, we're in this room. I think that's like the main answer is like the play has all these rehearsal room scenes, and the actors are, they're figuring stuff out in the room. So it started with the room that we're going to be in. It seemed the most logical thing. But I remember this one conversation that came up at a production meeting. We're like, well, we're in Soho Rep, but we need to sort of, shape it a little bit somehow. So, there's things about the architecture of the room that weren't helpful to the play. So, like, we built these 2 walls. And then in this one production meeting, there was a conversation of, like, what those walls should look like. Like, should they be, because the big question that we keep circling around is, like, what is real and what is theater? And we kind of go back and forth between those questions. So, like, there's real, like, we're aware that they're theatrical flats. And there was one moment where we thought, like, should we make the wall look like brick? But then it's fake brick, then it's not real. But, but usually when you talk about a naturalistic set, you're sort of faking it to look as real as possible. So that was like a big conundrum that I feel like we were circling around for a long time. Like basically all theater is fake. So do we point to that fakeness? That was a big question. Was like, do we just very clearly make them look like flats, or not? In the end, I ended up thinking that the best thing was to have it in general feel real. We don't really want to call attention to the fakeness because what's happening is, it's happening in this room. But I sort of went for like an uncanniness, like, people who have been in this room before sort of know, like, it's a Soho Rep. So I thought of it as sort of a Soho Rep in an alternate universe.
And I guess just one follow-up question to piggyback on that for Chris and Lenore. I'm curious about the differences between designing for the 2 worlds. So there's the presentation and then the process. How did you approach those? Because they were so different.
Well, I mean, from a lighting point of view, it was, I think very early on, we were thinking about the fluorescent light in a rehearsal room and thinking of that opposing sort of theatrical incandescence, and that sort of, it was the basis for the whole design, really. And it's also a contrast between a big wide open room and a tight controlled thing, I guess, sort of fundamental way for being controlled in the theater scenes, and big and open in the rehearsal room. I mean, which also actually just lends itself quite nicely to the fact that in the rehearsal, you don't know where somebody's going to go or what's going to happen, and so having light everywhere is quite handy.
And for the sound side, I mean, it felt like foliage. Like as we moved through the play, this sort of sound started coming out of all these places, and as we got closer to the lynching, it felt like there was more texture. What went through your head in sort of building these sound bases?
Well, I mean, I think fundamentally it was just that the presentation scenes had to be as broadly designed as I could possibly muster, hence GarageBand sound effects and anything that, a company of actors like this would potentially use to design their show, like clock sound now would be the clock, So there's there were just like bold, bad choices that I got to make in that sense. The exciting part about being here with a system like this, which is amazing quality speakers and a lot of them, is that I got to kind of have those really broad presentation choices be pretty obvious, that they're just sound playing from speakers. But then everything else in the process scenes kind of infiltrating just little kind of subtle subliminal things. So basically I had to kind of figure out how to make the process and presentation scenes seem very different. Obviously, if there's like a boingy sound effect playing, we're not in the processing anymore. But instead of adding more sound for the processing, I actually eliminated sound. Or for the presentation scene, I eliminated sound for the processing. So in the process scenes, there's a constant room tone that's happening that's hopefully like indiscernible. And then when we go to the presentation scenes, suddenly we're in a really blank theatrical sound kind of image. So it was I don't know if it works completely yet, we'll see. I have to sit in like 8 different places and see the show from different places to see if it sounds okay. But there was definitely like some kind of, there's a subliminal design, and then there's the broadest sound design I've ever done for a play on the presentation side, which was super fun to do, by the way.
Are there any other questions for designers? Anyone? Yes.
Oh, sorry, this isn't for the designer.
Or for anyone?
Okay, I'm just really curious about the history and what happened after 1915.
I think that there. I think that I think I would like to answer that by saying that I came into learning about the history through the more recent history, where in I think it was 2004 or 2001, there was a reparations claim that the Herero people brought against the German government in a court in America, and that claim was denied. And so there's a lot of complexity around a post-colonial genocide, and I think that I feel unequipped, I think, as a theater artist to speak eloquently about history. There's a really great book by George Steinmetz that you could read. But I think that the problem of, well, I like plays that have big problems in them, which is why this play is the way it is. But I think the problem of the play is that it references the history and lets you know that it exists, but it doesn't explain it in a way. It's not a historical play. So my goal was to point to I think what some audience members' relationship to it could be, and to let people do further inquiries into it themselves. And like, I hope that people are more interested in learning about colonialism after seeing the play.
And I must make a pitch. I entreat you to come back on November 20th. The Namibian ambassador to the UN is coming to do a post show, which is kind of incredible. So that should be an interesting yes. And any other questions for anyone on the panel? I guess, Jeff, I'm curious to know, what is it like to make such sort of bad design and turn it into something quite horrifying?
It was fun to. The great thing about it is working so closely with Eric and ultimately the actors to discover what that is. I mean, certainly the presentation is a very particular sort of beast, and I think, like Chris, it was about diving into the tools that, in this case, Actor 5 would use to, so actually doing it in PowerPoint and sort of like getting into her world a little bit.
I love it, Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah. You gotta just like dive into all the funny animations, and limitations, and you know, certainly there were moments where I was like, why am I still working in PowerPoint and not doing this in something where I can actually do things? But it was great. It was great, and it was very hard to bring it to the room the first time, like the first day of tech when we were like, okay, here's what I have. But yeah, and then the live feed stuff was a big question early on with Eric and I before we started the rehearsal process. Like, does it have a place? Does it not have a place? And we both felt like, you know what we need rehearsal. We need the actors to respond to that idea and just see what, if anything, comes out of it. And they really found those moments. So it was exciting, honestly, and it's a little. It's a little weird to have, you know, shitty video as like my design, but you know, I feel good about it because I feel like it does. I feel like it does what it needs to yeah. It does what it needs to do. So.
Anything else from anyone? You guys are the best for doing this on first preview. Thank you so much, and thank you for staying, everyone.